In the city of Salem, Indiana, in the year 1993, a woman named Elizabeth Mayberry walked into the North Salem United Methodist Church and fired 4 bullets into Minister Roland Phillips during the conclusion of his Sunday sermon, killing him in the pulpit in front of about 30 church members and his 13-year-old daughter. Mayberry would go on to be sentenced to 60 years imprisonment, but would be released early in 2009 after serving only 16 years behind bars. In a 1-hour confession to a female police officer hours after murdering Phillips in the pulpit, Mayberry described how she pre-planned taking his life in her own life since early in August of that year. She admittedly made her sinister plan a reality when she bought a firearm at a gun shop. Her purchasing that weapon would have deadly results. One of the most tragic parts about this case is that a 13-year-old little girl witnessed her father get brutally murdered in a hail of gunfire. One can only imagine that every individual that was in that church that day and saw their pastor get killed in front of them was left traumatized. The story begins in May 1992, when Mayberry and Phillips first crossed paths at a singles retreat sponsored by the United Methodist Church. Their connection evolved into a months-long relationship, during which Mayberry, then 35, alleges that Phillips and her engaged in various intimate acts. Mayberry claimed that Phillips encouraged her to let him kiss her using the exchange of consensual, mutual, asked if he could fondle and kiss her, and to engage in sexual intercourse. Mayberry stated that she was a virgin who had never been intimate with anyone before her interaction with Minister Phillips. The minister would respond to Mayberry's claims, telling the church officials that the two had never engaged in sex. In December 1992, Mayberry filed a complaint with the United Methodist Church, accusing Phillips of sexual misconduct. After a hearing before 3 United Methodist ministers to have Minister Phillips reprimanded based on Mayberry's allegations, they ruled that Phillips would not be ordained. A friend of Mayberry said that she felt vindicated by the minister's ruling and felt that justice had been served. It seems that Mayberry seeing her arch-nemesis Minister Phillips punished was a huge stress reliever, because she started acting like her old self again. Her newfound joy would be short-lived though, because unfortunately for her, the man that she was at odds with was not just another member of the church, he was a pastor that was truly loved by the congregation at North Salem United Methodist Church. They wanted their student pastor that they called Pastor Ron to be ordained in the faith. The members of the church gave him their full support, and he subsequently filed an appeal against the clergy's ruling. The clergy reversed what they had previously ordered and reinstated Phillips' ordination, but delayed it 1 year. I could see how the news of this ruling being overturned might have been an embarrassing and hurtful experience for Mayberry, witnessing the overturning of a decision that seemed to validate her grievances. In an unexpected turn, the clergy reversed their prior stance, reinstating Phillips' ordination but imposing a 1-year delay and mandating counseling. The congregation's joy clashed with Mayberry's despair, as her co-worker and best friend, Jane Hanser, described the profound impact on Mayberry. The emotional toll was evident. Mayberry reportedly lost 50 pounds, withdrew from social engagements, and immersed herself in isolation at work, wearing headphones and disengaging with everyone around her. For someone whose life was intricately tied to the church and a steadfast belief in God, Mayberry's response to the reinstatement was drastic. She renounced her church membership and abandoned her once unshakable faith, renouncing her belief in God. In a bizarre letter addressed to God, she expressed her disillusionment and attributed her past inability to see through Phillips' actions to her belief in God. In the letter she wrote, "Without my belief in you, I would have seen through his tricks." During counseling sessions with a Christian ministry volunteer, Mayberry openly described herself as depressed and hopeless, portraying a deep sense of loss and confusion. The turning point came on September 19, 1993, when Mayberry, armed with a handgun, attended the church service. Mayberry entered the church as Minister Phillips delivered a sermon on forgiveness. Interrupting the service, she approached the pulpit, expressing her desire to speak to Phillips. Despite his plea to sit and wait until he concluded, Mayberry stood off to the side, casting an intense glare at the minister. Little did the congregation realize that this seemingly ordinary Sunday service would morph into a gruesome scene of cold-blooded murder, shaking the very foundation of their church. Irene Wyeth, seated in the choir loft, noticed a bulge that looked like a gun in Mayberry's purse. Retired 79-year-old school custodian Ken Covey vividly recalled Mayberry's chilling words as she fired the first shots. Mayberry shouted, "If I can't have him, nobody will." Becky Compton, a nurse and choir member, witnessed the moment Mayberry drew a gun from her purse, describing the intense fear that gripped her as gunshots echoed through the church. As Phillips delivered his sermon, Mayberry approached the pulpit, accusing him of before shooting him. At this moment Covey intervened, wresting the gun away from Mayberry, which caused another shot to go off, sending a bullet into a nearby wooden railing. Becky Compton rushed to Minister Phillips, attempting to stop the bleeding from his wounds, while Mayberry screamed accusations of. She shouted, "You me. You me." The pastor on the floor dying looked up at her and said, "I didn't do it." Holding on to life, Pastor Ron asked Compton if his daughter Rachel was unharmed, and then a member of the congregation brought her to him. The mortally wounded minister told his daughter that he loved her, then she kissed him and said she loved him too. This reassurance of love was a heartbreaking moment witnessed by the grieving congregation. Church member June Ward also rushed to help Phillips, and when she did, Elizabeth Mayberry looked right at her and the words she spoke were chilling. She said, "He deserved to die." Two men held down Mayberry so she couldn't escape, and Ward helped out by sitting on her until the police got there. One of the men told Mayberry, "Don't even think about moving." Police officer John Hancock seized Mayberry's weapon and discovered a note in her purse, revealing her intent to end Phillips's life in her own. In a subsequent statement to Officer Susan Austin, Mayberry detailed her tumultuous relationship with Phillips and her plan to commit the heinous act. Phillips succumbed to gunshot wounds shortly after being rushed to the hospital. In my opinion, it appears that Mayberry became obsessed with Phillips and quite delusional in her behavior. He was first person she had a sexual relationship with, meeting in the spring of 1992 at a church singles seminar at McCormick's Creek State Park in Spencer. They began collaborating on church brochures together, and after a while they were dating. She told a co-worker that she found Phillips to be charming. They exchanged greeting cards, with one from Phillips to Mayberry expressing how she had brightened up his life. She asked God a question on a Sunday morning when she was praying at the communion rail at Bloomington's First United Methodist Church. She asked God for a sign to let her know if Minister Phillips was the man meant to be in her life. She felt her God half answered her question when she got home that day. Her phone was ringing and Phillips was the person calling her. At that moment she was convinced they were destined to be a couple. She testified to the congregation that she was flattered by the attention and the love he bestowed on her. But to Mayberry's surprise, in November she received a letter from Phillips putting an end to the relationship and suggesting that they start dating other people. Mayberry was extremely angry and felt betrayed and used by a man of God. Her mental state declined, and she wanted revenge. On the final day of Mayberry's trial, she testified how there were times she thought she'd just kill him and take the consequences, and then she'd change her mind thinking she's the one that had to die. Many people who were affected by this tragedy find it impossible to forgive Elizabeth Mayberry. They simply can't excuse away her senseless murder of a man that they loved and respected. A place of worship that was sacred and peaceful, until she senselessly unleashed rage and violence on that Sunday.